So let's now open CG Trader and download the models for this kitchen. Okay, so this is the next model that I'm going to download. I'll download the RAR file of this FBX. Okay, let's extract this FBX file. And let's go back in Unreal to import this FBX file. Okay, I'll open Unreal Engine. Let's create a new folder. I'll rename this folder as 7. Okay, and now I'll import that model. It's just a single mesh. I'll bring this model into my scene. Okay, and I'll rotate this model along Z axis. Yeah. Okay, let's increase the camera speed. I'm gonna use this texture for that model. Let's create a copy and I'll apply this texture on this mesh. Okay, let me set the rotation angle. And let's decrease the contrast. Yeah, okay. Let's save all of these settings. I'll select all of these objects and let's move them on x-axis. I'll select all of these objects and let's move them to folder number 6. And now I'll select all of these and I'll press Ctrl G on my keyboard to group them. Okay, let me press Shift G to ungroup it. I'll select this object and I'll move it to a different folder. Let's rename this as 7. Let's select all of these objects and I'll press Ctrl G on my keyboard to create a group. Okay, and let's move this folder outside. Yeah, okay. Let's now download another model from CG Trader. Okay, so let's download the FBX file of the scene. There are a number of kitchenware items that I can import into Unreal Engine and use it for my kitchen. I can also use this table. So let's download this FBX file and I'll import this into Blender to pick and choose some objects and make a few changes. You can import this FBX file in 3ds Max and you can make those changes from there. Okay, I'll open Blender and I'll delete all of these. Let's import that FBX file. I'll uncheck this box. Okay. Okay, so I'll select these exterior walls and I'll delete them. I'll do the same thing with the rooftop as well. Let's select these objects and I'll delete them. Okay, yes. Let's select this object and these objects. Okay, let's select this one as well. Okay, I'll select these objects as well. Let's export them in FBX. I'll rename this as 14.1 and let's select this render to Unreal preset and I'll check this box. Okay, let's export this in FBX. I'll go back to Unreal Engine. Okay, and let's open the folder of kitchenwares. I'll create a new folder. And let's import that FBX file. I'll select all of these static meshes. Okay, and I'll bring them into my scene. First of all, let's select this one. And I'll set the midpoint for these objects at the bottom. Now let's move them on y-axis. I'll move this up on z, move this on y. Let's rotate this on z-axis. Yeah, okay. And I'll press Alt N on my keyboard to snap it to the surface below. Let's move it on y-axis. Let's scale this down. Let's now select this one. And I'll set the midpoint of these objects at the bottom. Let's move them on y-axis. I'll press Alt End on my keyboard to snap it to the bottom surface. Yes. Let's now select this one. I'll set the midpoint of this object at the bottom. And let's find a position for this object. Let's now select these objects. Let me bring down my exposure. Yeah, okay. Let's move them on the y-axis. Let's set the pivot point of these objects at the bottom. Let's now move this on y-axis. I'll press Alt End on my keyboard to snap it to the surface below. Yes. Let's now select this switch. Let me set the midpoint at the center. Okay. Now I'll select these objects. Let's set the pivot point. I'll press Alt and my keyboard to snap it to the bottom surface. Okay. Now I'll select these objects. Yeah, okay. And I'll go into the modeling mode and let's set the origin point at the bottom. And let's bring them into the kitchen. I'll press Alt End on the keyboard. Let's rotate these on Z axis. So let's now apply the materials. I'll select this object. Let's search for the material of the plates. Okay, and I'll apply this material on maybe this one. Okay, yeah. Let's select all of these. And let's apply the spoon material on all of them. Okay, and let's apply the box material on this object. And for the border, let's apply this material. Okay, let me increase the exposure. Let's search for post process volume. Okay, and I'll increase the exposure. Yeah, let's create a copy and I'll apply this material. Okay, and let's decrease the base color. Let's select this material and let's increase the albedo value. Let's try maybe 0.7. Okay, yeah. Similarly, I'll apply this material on these objects. Okay, let's press Shift G to ungroup them. Okay, now I'll select these knives and let's apply this material. Yeah, let's apply this one. Okay, I'll select all of them and I'll apply this material. And for these objects, I'll apply this one, or maybe a darker one. Let's try this one. Yeah, I think that's okay. Yes. And on these containers, let's apply this material. Let's create another material instance and I'll make this darker. Maybe let's try zero point 0.2. Okay. I'll apply this material on the lid caps. Let's tweak the metallic and roughness values. Okay. Yeah, okay, this is fine. Let's search for this material. I'll apply this box material for this one as well. And let's apply the spoon material on these objects. Now for these spoons, I'll use this material. Let's search for this material in the content browser and I'll create a copy. Yeah, I think they'll look okay. You can also apply this material on these spoons maybe. Maybe on this one. Okay. Now let's try this material as well. Let's save all of these files. I'll open Blender. Okay, and now let's go into the top view. I'll go into the wireframe mode. I'll select all of these objects. Okay, let's deselect these lights. We'll set the origin for these objects to the geometry and I'll rotate them on Z-axis by 180 degrees. Let's delete this one because we'll download these fruits from Megascans library. Okay, and I don't know why, but I had a few problems with these objects. Okay, so I'll delete them. and let's create a copy. Okay, I'll select this object and let's create a copy. I'll move this on Z axis. I'll rotate this on Y axis by 180 and let's move this on Z. Let me enable my snapping. Let's move this and snap it at this point. Move it on X axis and I'll snap it at this point. Let's go into the edit mode. I'll select these vertices. Let's move them on X axis. Yeah, okay. Similarly, I'll select these objects. First, let me go into the top view. I'll select all of them. I'll deselect these lights. Let's put it right here. Now I'll select both of them. I'll create a copy. I'll rotate them on Y axis by 180 and let's snap them at this point. First, let me enable my snapping and I'll snap them at this point. Okay, yeah, yes. Now I'll select this object. I'll go into the top view and I'll rotate this on Z axis by 180. Let's move this on Y axis. Let me disable my snapping. Now I'll select this object. I'll go into the top view. Yeah, let me select all of these vertices. I'll separate this faucet by selection. Similarly, I'll select these objects. Let's go into the wireframe mode. Okay, I'll select these vertices. And I'll separate this one by selection. I'll go into the edit mode and now I'll select these vertices. Okay, and I'll separate them by selection. I'll select this mesh. Okay, I'll go into the edit mode. Let's go into the top view and I'll select these faces. Okay, and I'll separate these faces by selection. Okay, similarly, I'll select all of these vertices and I'll separate them by selection. Yeah, okay. Let's delete these vertices. No, let's undo this. For now, let's keep it as it is. Okay, I'll go into the top view. Let's select all of these objects and let's export them in FBX. I'll rename this as 14.1.fbx. Okay, Make sure you have selected this option, selected objects, and I'll export them. Let's jump back to Unreal Engine. I'll create a new folder and let's rename this folder as 9. Okay, yeah. Let's import that FBX file. I'll save all of them. Okay. Before I bring them into my scene, let's select these objects and I'll move them into a different folder. Let's rename this as 8. Okay. And now I'll select all of my static meshes and I'll bring them into my scene. I'll press F to focus. Yeah, okay. Let's move these objects on y-axis and let's set the pivot point for these objects at the bottom. Let's rotate them on z-axis. Yes. Let's search for this material in the content browser and I'll apply this material on this object. I'll try white on this one. Yeah, okay. Let's search for this material and I'll apply this material on this shelf. Okay. Let's scale this down. Maybe try 1 or 0.5. Let me increase the tile size on Y. And let's increase the contrast. Yeah, okay. What just happened? I think I should have applied the duplicate material. Okay. So let's apply duplicate material on this mesh. And let's set the tile size to 5. Okay. Let's now search for this silver material. And I'll apply this material on this mesh. Let's try this one or maybe this one. Yeah, I think this is fine. Let me decrease the camera speed. Yeah, let's try this material on this object. Okay. Yes. And for these chairs, let's try this material. I'll search for this material. Let me increase my camera speed to 2 and let's create a duplicate material. Let's apply this material on these objects. Okay. Let's search for this silver material. I'll create a copy. Bring this down to maybe 0.1. Let's apply this material on this chair. Let's search for this material and I'll apply this material on this object. And for this one, I think they are combined. Yeah. Let's apply this material instead. Okay. Okay, so our kitchen is almost ready. When we'll move on to the foliage section, we'll download a few pots and a few plants for these empty spaces. Okay. And similarly, when we'll move on to the simulations part, we'll create a physics simulation inside Unreal Engine in which we'll drop a bunch of fruits on a fruit basket. Okay. So I think that's it for this video. In the next lecture, we'll download some 3D models for our bathroom, just like we did for our kitchen. Okay. So I'll see you guys in the next lecture.